This is the ultimate question. What phone should I buy? Even for $150 new, I wouldn't recommend buying this one. But let's talk about it first. Should you buy the ZTE Axon M in 2019? Hello everyone, my name is Matt and this is Real World Review. Check out the social media above in the description for some extras. Let's get started. This is the main point of the phone, right? There's one screen, and now there's two. They are both 5.2-inch 1080p IPS LCDs at 16:9, but when combined, you get a 6.75-inch screen. I guess that's something like an 8:9 screen ratio when it's open. Kinda weird. When the phone is closed, this seems like a normal phone, just a thick one with an unneeded chin on the bottom, just like a Pixel one. Overall, it's not a terrible panel like you would assume, but it's also not the best. For being an LCD, the brightness is pretty low. The colors are alright, which is kind of disappointing for a device that you would assume is going to be used for viewing media most of the time. The front camera is under the glass of the screen, which is kind of cool, and both screens are covered by Gorilla Glass 5, but clearly that doesn't really mean much. When opened and turned to the side, the phone seems like a flat Nintendo DS, which you can kind of turn it into if you want. Okay, let's go over the 4 modes. Mirror mode is cool if you're showing someone something on your screen. That's about it. Full screen mode is cool, I guess. Swiping through the screens works surprisingly well. The keyboard will split or it'll almost fit the screen. Remember that part in a few minutes. There is 2 app mode, which is kind of cool. If you try hard enough, you can watch 2 videos at the same time. This would be cool if the phone can actually operate faster, but because of the processor, it can't. Doing something like copying a tracking number from one screen to another would be awesome, but it's slower than I would like. Lastly, you have one screen mode, which seems weird, but it's pretty useful if you use the other screen like a kickstand. It's actually a pretty good implementation for this mode. By the way, the hinge seems super sturdy and snaps into place nicely. Also, having 2 screens on the outside means you can't have a magnet for mounts, at least that's what it seemed like at first. The battery life is not that good, which isn't too surprising. It's an odd 3180 mAh cell, even with the thickness of the phone. To be fair, it's not much thicker than the OnePlus 7 Pro, and it is smaller than the Galaxy Fold when folded. Geekbench is only seeing a 1-hour time difference when the phone is open, so that's not going to be that much of an issue. The issue is the standard 4-hour time that I was getting from the test when folded closed. The phone is over a year old, which might be why my battery life isn't that good, but I'm not the only one complaining about this issue. Finding a new battery for this is not really worth the money because most of them are only used batteries that you can find online and they cost way too much. Geekbench Battery Life was saying that I was getting more than the Pixel XL, but real life testing says otherwise. Getting through a day is troublesome, especially if you're watching videos with 1 or 2 screens. The phone does support Quick Charge 3.0 and charges reasonably fast, so that helps the battery situation a little bit. There's no wireless charging on this phone for obvious reasons, but putting one behind the second screen might have worked. This is where I realized the phone is not that good. This phone has a Snapdragon 821 chip, which sounds decent, but it's set to 2.15 GHz, unlike the 2.35 GHz OnePlus 3T and LG G6. Unfortunately for ZTE, the Google Pixel XL runs at the same 2.15 GHz, but it runs a lot smoother than the Axon M. To be honest, the performance makes phones like the Samsung S7 feel a lot faster, even though it houses a Snapdragon 820 chip, and that's because it kind of is. Well, according to Geekbench 4, it is, by a lot. The phone has 4GB of RAM, which isn't too bad for the phone when it was released, but the dual screens definitely makes it not enough RAM. The processing power is really to blame, but even doing basic stuff like activating or using the second screen slows down the phone and makes it a very clunky experience. It's a cool design, but it's just not implemented properly. Games like PUBG run surprisingly well, but they look weird on the dual screen mode. But the performance does still keep up, which is kind of cool. Just make sure to set up the screens before running the game. They really should have stuck to the Snapdragon 835 chip when they were making this phone. The speaker setup is a really weird one because there are dual speakers on this phone, but the top one is super quiet and honestly kind of pointless. Still, the speakers are loud, but they're nothing special. The phone houses a headset jack too, which is kind of cool. The phone is definitely a left-handed phone, seeing how the phone opens up and the fact that the fingerprint scanner is on the left side of the phone. This phone also supports a memory card, but the built-in 64GB of memory should be pretty good for most people. This button on the side is called the Quick Launch button, and it's kind of cool because you can set it up to open up the camera or open up any app of your choice. Okay, so let's talk about the camera, because there's only one. It's a 20 megapixel selfie camera, technically, that lacks optical image stabilization. That's frustrating. There's a dual LED flash unit to the left of it. You can capture video at pretty much any quality that you want up to 4K, all at 30 frames per second. Lacking 1080p at 60 frames per second is frustrating, but it's not the most frustrating part of this camera. Instead, the most frustrating part is simply activating the camera. By default, the back camera opens, so this happens every single time. Sure, you can open up the camera and switch to the selfie camera and it'll retain that setting, but if you fully close the app, now you're back to the back camera. There's an option to switch from the selfie camera to the back camera by flipping the phone, which is cool, but you can't go back to the selfie camera by doing the same thing. This follows to apps like Snapchat. Yeah, it's fun. The different modes give you different camera options when taking pictures, which I guess is kind of cool. The last one, for using it as a kickstand, could be a cool feature. As for the camera quality, it's decent. Sure, it doesn't beat phones like the Pixel, but the camera isn't completely useless. What I did notice is that you do have to be still, especially in low lit areas, or else you'll get a blurry mess. Also, the camera has a very slight pink tint to it, but this is something you'll probably only notice when you're comparing it to other phones' cameras. It gets the job done whether you're taking selfies or rear shots, but it could be better, especially when they only had to pay for one camera. There's a ton of modes in this camera, so I'll give them an A for trying, but the camera itself gets something like a C. This phone does not have a bright future. Buying an overseas model might be decent, but this one, the AT&T version, has a terrible future. Since it is an AT&T model and I'm using it on T-Mobile, I have to rely on the inferior network switching method that AT&T uses. So my signal is effectively worse with this phone. Did I mention that not only is this phone on Android 7.1.2, but it's there to stay with the ZTE ban in the United States. 8.0 for US versions were planned, but the US government came in and effectively killed that version. So this phone is essentially stuck on 7.1.2 with a January 2018 security patch. Forever. USB-C on the bottom is cool, as well as a headset jack, but the phone clearly lacks any water resistance and wireless charging. The dual speaker setup sucks and will only get worse over time, just like the battery. The camera quality doesn't really help this section either. The dual screen setup is cool, but it's one of a kind, and with foldable screens coming with Android Q, it doesn't seem like the support will trickle down nicely to this Android Nougat phone. Buying this is definitely not the best use for your money, unless you're looking for something to play Nintendo DS ROMs on. So what do you think? Should you buy this phone in 2019? I would say no. This is a novelty phone for sure, but in a bad way. There aren't many dual screen phones out there, but this definitely is one of the worst on that very short list. Honestly, if the phone ran faster, I might consider recommending this phone, but as is, I cannot. Go buy a Google Pixel or something like that. And that's all I wanted to talk about. Hopefully you enjoyed this video and be prepared for more videos in the future. If you have any questions, let me know in the comment section below or on Twitter at MattofRWR. And feel free to follow me on the social media listed above. Subscribe to my channel for more review videos like this, as well as some repair videos. And hit that bell button to let YouTube know that you're serious. Thanks for watching.